Easter eggs in video games. Everybody loves them. There's something I always loved in video games, and the Sonic series has had its fair share of Easter eggs relating to other SEGA games, so today, I just wanted to take a look at some of them. If you have a favorite Easter egg in this series, just let me know in the comments below, and if you're new here, you should also hit that subscribe button. We're only 999,986,800 subscribers away until we hit a billion, so any help would be appreciated in reaching this goal. There are also some big videos I have planned in the coming months, and you definitely do not want to miss those. Also, stick around to the end of the video if you want to help me with my next big project. Anyways, enough banter, let's crack open a few of these Easter eggs. The first of these is from Sonic the Fighters. Honey the Cat is a character that was planned to be in the arcade version of Sonic the Fighters, but due to time constraints she was left out of the final build. However, the 2012 re-release of this game for Xbox 360 and PS3 programmed her back in as a secret character. By pressing the start button while hovering over Amy and then selecting Amy, you can play as Honey. Now how is this a reference, you might be asking? Well, Honey is actually the name of a character in another one of SEGA's fighting games, Fighting Vipers. Fighting Vipers released the previous year in 1995 and was actually the inspiration for creating Sonic the Fighters. I think it's pretty cool how Sonic the Fighters decided to reference the game it was based off of by adapting one of the characters into the Sonic art style. It just sucks Honey was never finished for the official arcade release of the game. Moving into the age of the Dreamcast and Sonic Adventure, this is where we start to see a lot more references to other SEGA games. And the first of these you'll probably encounter is the Knights table, also known as Card and Pinball, and Sonic's Casinopolis. In this pinball table, you'll see a bunch of cards of Knights characters that Sonic can collect periodically. Once you collect 5 of them in one ball, a door will open in the upper right hand of the pinball table. If you can get Sonic into there, he'll be transported to a bonus play field. Falling in this section will lead to a small cutscene of Sonic flying around Spring Valley where he will encounter a bunch of Knightopians, and in the center will be Knights doing some funky dance moves. If you instead launch Sonic forward on the bonus table, it's possible to hit the machine, also known as idea capture, in the middle of the table. By doing so, Sonic and Knights will fly through a bunch of rings all around the idea capture. Now let's talk about what Knights actually is, because they'll be popping up a lot throughout this video. Knights is the main character of the game Nights into Dreams that was released on the Sega Saturn in 1996, and was developed by Sonic Team. It follows teenagers Elliot and Clarice who enter Knightopia, a dream world where all dreams take place. With the help of Knights, an exiled Nightmarian, they begin a journey to stop the evil ruler Wiseman from destroying Knightopia and the real world. I'm not going to go too in depth with the story or gameplay, but the reason why there is a lot of Knights references in these first two Sonic games is because Knights was one of the first Sonic games Sonic Team created that was not a Sonic related game. Wow, that was a lot of Sonic in one sentence. I've never played the game before, but I certainly would want to get my hands on a copy someday. Getting back to the other references in Sonic Adventure, we have another Knights reference in the Chow. If you feed a Chow a bunch of flying type animals and have it evolve into a neutral fly Chow, it will resemble Knights. Once it gets older, it'll grow to resemble Knights even more. There are some more references in these Chow, but we'll save them for Sonic Adventure 2. The final reference that you all have probably heard somewhere before is the hidden Dreamcast on E105 Zeta. When you get to the end of Gamma's final level, Hot Shelter, you fight Zeta in an upgraded form compared to when you last saw him. If you look at his model, you can see lots of Dreamcasts scattered throughout. Well, that's all we got for Sonic Adventure, but before we jump ship to SA2, you first need to stop at Sonic Shuffle. For those unaware, Sonic Shuffle is a party game released for the Dreamcast in 2000. There's this character who's named Lumina, who is essentially the guide of the game. By playing the game on December 24th, also known as Christmas Eve, Knights will replace Lumina as the guide but still keeps all their voice lines. That's really the only SEGA reference I can find in this game, so let's move on to... Since we've talked about Knights so much already, let's just go through these Knights references quickly so we can move on to other references in the game. This one most people know, but there are tons of Knights iconography sprinkled throughout City Escape and Radical Highway. As we've discussed previously, you can make a neutral fly Chow that looks like Knights, but also people say that if you raise a dark Chow and evolve it into a flying type Chow, it looks like Riella, another character from Knights. Honestly, I don't really see the resemblance besides the thing on the Chow's head that sticks out. Okay, now on to some references that aren't from Nights into Dreams. If you head to Mad Space and you go right below the spawning platform, you'll see a metal box. If you break it, you'll see some sort of blue object that's found nowhere else in the game. This item always stumped me as a kid as to what it was supposed to be, but it turns out it's an item called the Armor Box from Phantasy Star Online, an RPG released by SEGA in 2000. Now I have no idea why Sonic Team decided to put it in here of all places, since you can't really do anything with it. The most you can do is throw it at enemies, but why do that when you just use Oma Chow instead?
Life is pain!
On the Dreamcast version of the game, or using mods with the PC version, you could download Fantasy Zone DLC. Not to be confused with Phantasy Star Online, Fantasy Zone is a 1986 arcade game developed by SEGA in which you control a sentient spaceship called an Appa Appa, who fights off enemy invasions. In Sonic Adventure 2, you can download this Fantasy Zone DLC and play as Omochao driving an Appa Appa themed kart in the kart racing minigame. While using this kart, there's also a live and learn instrumental version playing in the background. Take a listen. Moving on from Adventure 2, the next game on our list is Shadow the Hedgehog, which actually has more references than I realized. Right away in Lethal Highway, when Shadow falls from the launch pad, we can see a billboard advertising Knights once again. If you have some keen ears and some time on your hand, why don't you spend some time chilling next to some gun soldiers? Every once in a while you can hear them saying, "Mr. Yuji Naka is alright," a reference to the co-creator of Sonic the Hedgehog, Yuji Naka. After beating the hero mission of Westopolis, Black Doom tells us that we did a bad job of being a bad guy. But Sonic, being enthusiastic, says,
"Guess that means, welcome to the next level. Let's go."
The line, "welcome to the next level," was a saying used a lot when promoting the Sega Genesis back in the 90s. If you go back and watch a lot of these old Sega commercials, they usually end with "welcome to the next level" or "Genesis does what Nintendo don't," but I'm getting too ahead of myself. The final reference is the cocksucker. I mean the egg vacuum. It's a weapon you can find in special shadow crates after beating Lava Shelter for the first time. It's a weapon based on Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg, a 2003 GameCube platformer developed by Sonic Team. The weapon really just sucks up enemies and rings around Shadow, but it's a nice little reference to Billy Hatcher. Well, that wraps up Shadow the Hedgehog, so let's jump forward to 2006's Sonic Riders. Sonic Riders has a couple of interesting cameos and references to past Sonic games, and the most apparent of those cameos is the playable appearances of Knights, Ulala, and Ai. You all should know Knights by now, but let's take a look at these new characters. Ulala is the main protagonist of Space Channel 5, a Dreamcast game published by Sega in 1999. Moving on to the Monkey, Ai is a character from Super Monkey Ball series of games. He's obsessed with bananas and loves fighting bad guys with his family. These characters aren't the only Sega references in this game though. There are two courses that are filled with Sega references. The first of these is the Sega Carnival. There are 5 distinct areas in this course referencing 5 different Sega games, making it such a distinct track to race through. The first of these is a bustling town referencing Samba de Amigo, a rhythm game released in 1999 for arcades and for the Dreamcast in 2000. We can see a few of the characters performing and the buildings bouncing around with excitement. Following this, the player travels through a pirate ship from Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg. After that, the player is shot out of a cannon to a castle from Nights into Dreams. Then they are transported into the plains of Super Monkey Ball with some waterfalls on the side. The final area we travel through is the town from Crazy Taxi, a Sega game in which the player picks up pedestrians and drops them off at desired locations. When driving a pedestrian around, a giant green arrow is placed at the top of the screen directing the player on where they should go. We can see the same green arrow in Sonic Riders, and it's a small detail, but it makes me love this track so much more. The other reference-heavy track in this game is Sega Illusion. It starts off similar to Sega Carnival, having the player travel through Samba de Amigo themed area, but this time, a lot of Appa Appa are walking around as obstacles for the player to avoid. From there you could travel to the Knight's Castle, and then you head to an area meant to resemble some aspects of Space Channel 5. The final area is a large maze meant to resemble the one seen in Choo Choo Rocket, a puzzle game released in 1999 for the Dreamcast developed by Sonic Team. In Choo Choo Rocket, you placed arrow tiles around a board to help mice escape while avoiding cats. Well, that's everything from Sonic Riders, so let's move forward to the game's sequel, Sonic Riders Zero Gravity. Knights is once again brought back as a playable character, but Ai and Ulala were replaced with Billy Hatcher from, well, Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg, and Amigo from Samba de Amigo. Similar to Riders, Zero Gravity also has 2 courses that are filled with Sega references, but each course tackles a different point in time. So let's dive in and take a look at the first course, 80s Boulevard. So these courses have a lot of billboards and niche references to games and consoles and such, so I'm going to go through these kind of quickly, and if there are multiple instances of the same billboard, I'll only be addressing them once. Also, no Sonic stuff, we're just looking at Sega here. Right at the starting line, we can see a ton of billboards, so let's start to the left and move to the right. On the left, we can see pictures of a Sheriff for the Master System, Maze Hunter 3D for the Master System, E-SWAT City Under Siege for the Mega Drive, Shinobi 3's title screen, the Sega Ages 2500 Volume 5 version of Golden Axe, Blade Eagle for the Master System, Crackdown for the Mega Drive, and the arcade version of Shinobi's title screen. We can also see the Mega Drive logo on a billboard above a huge billboard for the Sega Genesis. Looking around some more in the starting area, we see logos for the Sega Dreamcast, Saturn, and a different Genesis billboard off to the right. Taking a step back, there are 2 giant Sega logos over the starting line, a giant Pengo board ahead of that, and a sign for Phantasy Star beneath it. Finally on the right, we can see a giant advertisement for Altered Beast. After crossing the starting line, yes, all that was in the starting line area, we come across a huge sign that says Alex Kidd on it, and beneath that is an advertisement for a Mega cartridge. These are what Sega called Master System cartridges since they could only hold a megabyte of data, and Alex Kidd is an old Sega platform released for the Master System. Taking the turn and moving forward, there are tons of references to Fantasy Zone, including some Appa Appa and electric billboards, and an enemy from the games. If we take the following jump, there are streamers with the word Phantasy Star off to the right, billboards with Phantasy Star on them, and the box art of Phantasy Star for the Master System and Phantasy Star 2 for the Genesis. After jumping off the ramp on the road, we can see a large billboard with Gain Ground written on it, and the sword sticking out of it. This of course references the Sega game Gain Ground for the Genesis. If we keep moving forward and hop off the wall, we can see billboards for Space Harrier 1 and 2. And we can also see some lights with the Game Gear logo on it as well. And if we take a look to our left, we can see Game Gear written out like the Sega logo, which is pretty cool. And that's really it for this course. Everything else from here on out is really just a repeat of what we've seen before. So now let's move on to 90s Boulevard. 90s Boulevard doesn't have nearly as many references, but we're still going to go through them kind of quickly so we can move on to the next game. So let's do this thing. First, you'll notice a lot of Sonic references here, which makes sense for a course called 90s Boulevard, but we're not talking about that today. Like in 80s Boulevard, we'd see 2 Sega logos above the starting line. Looking to the left, we can see the Mega Drive logo, and there's also an electric billboard that says Sega Ages on it, which is a series of ports and remakes of video games released by Sega over the past 20-30 years at this point. The big ticket item in this shot is the giant statue of Akira from Virtua Fighter, one of Sega's other huge properties at this time. Continuing down the track, we can see 2 billboards with Jewel Master on it, which was released on the Genesis in 1991. Looking forward, we see 2 different banners of Nights into Dreams, and we can even see a bust of Knight's head on top of the entrance into this museum looking thing. After going through the museum and climbing up a building, we skate along a wall with the Sonic Team logo plastered on it and the Sega logo on an electronic billboard next to it. Once we get off the wall, we can see a billboard advertising one of Sega's other games, Crazy Taxi. If we grind along this grind rail here, we can see quite a few references in this shot. Going from left to the right, there is a box art for Shenmue released on the Dreamcast in 1999, the Phantasy Star Online logo, a Dreamcast logo, and the box art for House of the Dead 2 for arcades in 1998, but a Dreamcast port was created for it in 1999. We can see a Sega Saturn logo on this billboard over here, and those with a keen eye would notice the Sega Genesis logo down on the side of this road. And with that, those are all the references in this game. I did like how they referenced all these smaller games that were released on past systems, but let me tell you, figuring out which games were scattered throughout the 80s Boulevard was not easy, especially since any text on them was too hard to read or in Japanese. Moving into the 2010s, Sonic Dash only has a couple of Sega characters that make cameos here. Kinda. You see, Sonic Dash has plenty of non-Sonic or even Sega related characters added to the game like Hello Kitty or Pac-Man, and for the purpose of today's video, the Angry Birds. In 2015, Sonic Dash had an event where you could unlock a few of the Angry Birds, but they were not a part of the Sega brand at all until 2023 when Sega purchased Rovio, the company behind the Angry Birds series of games, for over $70 million. So they aren't really a Sega cameo character, but I thought I'd still bring it up. Also released in 2013, Sonic Lost World has a reference to Knights, but only in the Wii U version of the game unless you happen to download a couple of mods for PC. This Knights DLC is called the Nightmare Zone, basically a glorified boss rush with Knights characters showing up in the background elements or being incorporated into the boss somehow, like Zaz riding on Puffy instead of his moon mech. Hey, Sonic Runners, remember that game? If not, you should check out this video I made on it back in October. Anyways, Sonic Runners has buddies you can equip that help give you boosts as you run forward. While most of these buddies are Sonic characters, a few of them are from other Sega properties as well. There's a Nightopian, Idea, Christmas Nightopian, Knights themselves, Rila, and Christmas Knights buddy you can equip from Nights into Dreams. There's a purple Pabrisu, Suk Tudara, and Carbuncle from Puyo Puyo, which is a tile matching game similar to Tetris but without the different block shapes. You can equip an Appa Appa from Fantasy Zone, a Rappy, Meg, and Kuna from Phantasy Star Online, a Sega Genesis, and a Sega cartridge with Sonic 1 on the front of it. I don't really have an opinion on these guys since I've never really used them, but I think it's nice that Sonic Team is deciding to reference other games other than Knights for once. Sonic Mania doesn't really have any references to anything outside of the Sonic series, but there are a few things that pop up throughout Studiopolis, so let's head there. If we take a close look at the trucks that beam you throughout Act 1, you can see the words Hornet High Class printed on the side of it. This is referring to the stock car the player uses in Daytona, USA, an arcade racer released in 1994. Speaking of those trucks, the monitors that they beam you onto actually have Game Gear buttons underneath the screen that you pop out of. It can be hard to spot if you destroy the monitor, but if you find one that isn't broken, it's pretty easy to tell the similarities. Moving on from Mania and into Sonic Forces, we have quite a few costumes for the Avatar character that reference old and current SEGA games, or games that were made by a company which is owned by SEGA. The first of these is a costume based on Ai from Super Monkey Ball, the next is a costume based on Amity from Puyo Puyo, following that is a costume based on Beat from Jet Set Radio, and also for those unaware, Jet Set Radio is a 2000s action game released on the Dreamcast that has you play as Beat while you spray graffiti places and avoid the authorities. After Beat, we have a costume based on Joker from Persona 5. Now while Persona 5 is a game developed by Atlus, SEGA owns Atlus, so there's that little connection there. And of course, this wouldn't be a Sonic game with references if there wasn't some sort of reference to Knights, and that's what we got with the Knights costume. Now I think these costumes are great ways to represent these series. I just wish there were more costumes based off other SEGA games like Billy Hatcher, Samba de Amigo, Crazy Taxi, games like that, but I'm very glad we got the references that we did. Next on our list of games is actually a remake, that being Sonic Colors Ultimate. While no new references were introduced in the levels or gameplay, there are a ton of cameos of SEGA games in the profile icons you can buy and equip. There's a lot, so let's speed through these quickly. We see a yellow Puyo, a purple Puyo, a red Puyo, a green Puyo, and a blue Puyo from Puyo Puyo Tetris, Virtua Fighter, Altered Beast, Samba de Amigo, Christmas Nights, and Knights from Nights into Dreams, Alex Kidd, Skies of Arcadia, Shining Force, Rent a Hero, Clockwork Knight, Shenmue, Crazy Taxi, Jet Set Radio, Panzer Dragoon 2, Panzer Dragoon Orta, Rez, Ulala from Space Channel 5, Rolf and Ney from Phantasy Star 2, Rise and Mayu from Phantasy Star 3, Chaz, Ashley, and Rika from Phantasy Star 4, and finally Ai from Super Monkey Ball. And with that being said, let's take a look at the last game to reference other SEGA properties, Sonic Superstars. There are only two notable references in this game, and the first of those is in the battle mode of Sonic Superstars. In there, you can unlock a metal version of Knights. You can use them in the battle mode if you have the correct parts equipped, and they show up as the boss in Cyber Station Zone. The final reference in this video is in Frozen Base Act 2. It's paying direct homage to Fantasy Zone, all the way down to the enemies and bosses being stylized after enemies from Fantasy Zone. Also, Tails' Eggmobile he rides in during this level looks eerily similar to an Appa Appa, which makes this reference that much cooler. As I've said in this video, I love when games reference other games, and the Sonic team does such a good job at incorporating references to other SEGA characters in this game that I can't help but smile whenever I see one. And that's about it for this video, but I want to hear what your favorite reference in this video was. For me personally, I think my favorite has to be the playable SEGA characters in the Sonic Riders games, but maybe you have a different opinion and I want to hear about that down in the comments below. If you liked the video, then leaving a like and subscribing shows me that you guys really like these kinds of videos and that I should make more. Now, this is the end of the video, but if you want to help participate in a future video, there's a link in the description to a form asking you what your favorite Sonic game is. If you would like to participate in this survey, then filling that out would be greatly appreciated. Well, that's all I got for today, so I hope you all enjoyed the video and I hope you all have a great day. Peace.